me give you a little pharmakia update here. So we've been talking about the move into the psychedelic sort of one world religion, the increase of official, not just scientific interest, but spiritual interest in sort of these government approved spiritual movement. Now, we've been following this, of course, through our work in the Burning Man research since 2014. And now we've seen it where, psychedelic shamans are popping up at the World Economic Forum in Davos. We've seen the last report we brought here was regarding psychedelic chaplains and how psychedelic chaplains are being integrated into the scientific experiments as far as research is considered into psychedelics. And it seems like we're going to take that one step further, actually. This is coming from the New Yorker, of all places. We're getting pretty fancy here on the show. And the headline is, "Can Psychedelics Heal Ukrainians' Trauma?"
Hey, this article's from the future, too. It's February 27th, 2023 issue. It's 3 days from now. We're time traveling.
From the issue that comes out. Yeah. Yes, it's not printed yet. It'll be printed. But this article came out on the 20th. Late last month, the Biden administration announced that the U.S. would send 31 M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. Meanwhile, in New York, a Ukrainian delegation, including a representative of the Territorial Defense Forces, had gathered to consider other types of aid. The goal, according to an ad for the event, was to promote, quote, "the psychological and spiritual resilience of the Ukrainian people living in trauma, crisis, and war. One possible avenue for healing, psychedelics." Mm-hmm. So we've got this trauma talk, which we've talked about over the past couple of years, but psychedelics being at the top of the menu. And there's a delegation of a number of artists and spiritual leaders and doctors and military people. And it's, for a couple paragraphs here, just sets up the fact that war is depressing and ugly, and et cetera, et cetera. Talking about this person named Vanderberg here. She gestured to the Reverend I don't know how to pronounce this, but Serhiy Dmitriev, a chaplain for the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces, who had just walked in wearing his uniform. Quote, "He's bringing his spiritual practices to defenders," she said, defenders being Ukrainian troops. Quote, "He wears an earring to indicate that he's the last living man of his family. Before lining up to go into battle, the men with the earrings are traditionally in the back." The panelists took their seats in a row of office chairs. Dmitriev kicked things off by telling the group, through a translator, that he hopes to train 1,500 military chaplains in a special spiritual resilience program. So we got a special spiritual resilience program. Let's check it out. A man visiting from Ukraine asked the panel, quote, "How can I help the guys I know who have lost friends?" And it goes through a bit more explaining the situation, transitioning to civilian life after the war, combat experience is going to, take a toll. Mentioned how Ibogaine is being used to treat other soldiers for, cat is crawling all over me. Sorry. Things like that. It kind of talks about some of the general issues and some of where the solutions are being held regarding psychedelics. Here's a quote, groups in Ukraine are, quote, "pushing for legalization of psychedelics for medical use," Drew said. Skipping down a paragraph, "A psychedelic solution has already been under discussion in Ukraine. After the panel convened, Yuri Blokin, who moved from Kyiv to Canada and who runs the North American branch of the Ukrainian Psychedelic Research Association, was reached by phone. Quote, ayahuasca saved my life after an episode of depression, he said. Then I met an Army Ranger, and we started using it to help special ops veterans. We want to make sure that when the war in Ukraine ends, there are world-class options, and it can become an additional stream of revenue for Ukraine. So kind of talking about legalizing... Baby. Yeah, ayahuasca in Ukraine, because places like Costa Rica and Mexico, it's a kind of big business having these ayahuasca retreats, mostly from Americans and Europeans who can't get it otherwise. He added that there was, quote, a critical mass of open-mindedness in Ukraine, and mentioned, quote, the government's dynamic startup culture. Blokin wants to train therapists who will treat Ukrainian refugees in the use of psychedelics. Quote, it's not a good idea to use psychedelics in country during war, he said. Setting is really important, and you want a safe space. So... maybe not implementing this psychedelic therapeutic system in Ukraine right now while the bombs are going off, but part of the reconstruction, the spiritual reconstruction of Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes sense to all the stuff we've been looking at over the years and the development of it. And certainly how convenient to have these psychedelic
timing.
The psychonaut chaplains ready to go to help all those traumatized Ukrainians, and then also make some money, baby. Make the money with the psychedelics.
I know. I thought that was a pretty funny part of it.
Honest about that.
I know. Like, that's kind of the thing, is that you want to kind of scoff at it, but they are being, in the conversation of rebuilding Ukraine.
Yeah.
Not only rebuilding it spiritually for refugees, but rebuilding it financially.
Yeah.
I'm sure BlackRock would want to get in on it.
It's just crazy how, the military industrial complex can sell the weapons to have war. And then they have people like BlackRock go in there and sponsor things for post-war to rebuild.
Totally. It's part of the business model.
It is. And I wonder if BlackRock is involved with this particular. You got some BlackRock high-level guys going in there like, hey, man, I know how to save all those traumatized Ukrainian brains.
Well, you got to remember, of course, BlackRock is attending Davos.
Yeah.
And, you got the psychedelic shaman in Davos. Who knows? Maybe they got some investment in some of these companies. But, talking about the sort of broader meta shift around the world to the secular religion, you talk about a one world secular religion, people have theorized that it's going to be some combination of the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. But I think as far as a secular religion goes, it looks like psychedelia is becoming the number one option. And they're already establishing a priesthood, the chaplaincies all around the world.
Right. And we've talked about the bridging between the reenchantment topic of bridging between the traditional forms of medicine with this new sort of psychedelic nature type of stuff. And it really covers a whole lot. It covers a lot in the Gnostic realm. It covers a lot in the pagan realm. So it's very useful in that way. And it's connected to an experience. They're always looking for an experience, Right. So I think that's fascinating, especially in light of today where people want that real life encounter.
Well, that's certainly one way to do it.
Yep.
So we'll keep an eye out for that. But I think it's, they're already talking about the end of the war. You've got financially the rebuilding of Ukraine. You've got the spiritual rebuilding of Ukraine. Everybody's talking a lot about rebuilding once the war's over. It kind of feels like, and this on the 1 year anniversary of the start of the war.
There you go.
On this day, 1 year ago, we were reporting on the initial invasion.
I like how
crazy.
I like how China is kind of like, hey, stop sending the weapons to Ukraine. Send it to Taiwan. We want to fight.
China wants it. Well, see, that's what I
fight. We want to send our suicide drones. Come on.